There is an exhausting recurring debate taking place online. The question is, are Somali people black? It feels at times that the blackness of Somali is being uniquely scrutinized, and it's not only happening online. The purpose of this video is not to impose our viewpoint on the matter, but to highlight the views of Somali who reject the notion that they are black. This, in my opinion, is crucial if we are to objectively empathize with both sides of the argument. Here are 5 justifications given by the Somali and many other African tribes who reject being labeled as black. 1. In Africa, generally, people do not specify and identify with being black. This is understandable as they are living in a society where people differentiate themselves by ethnicity and tribes and not by the color of their skin, as it would be pointless. Those who live in Africa are not burdened with these Eurocentric ideas about race. A racial identity does not exist for them. That is why some Somali, especially older ones, do not identify as black. Somali may not identify as black because it would then overlook their own specific identity. They have their own religion, beliefs, language, and traditions, but in America, these are ignored and they are considered black. Race is a social construct and one that does not truly exist in Somalia as there is no cultural context for it. Somali are simply Somali, a people native to the Horn. Two, also because of the fact that people still subconsciously see Africa as one gigantic country with one huge group of people, we don't tend to look into the people who live on this second largest giant continent. There are 54 countries in Africa, and usually even within these countries, there are different ethnic groups with different languages. You can't group an entire continent and expect them to all look the same. Once again, as I've mentioned before, Africa is a continent. An incredibly genetically diverse continent, one where the entire human race came from. Like I said before, the majority of the world only sees a certain group of Africans, and the whole world also tends to subconsciously regard Africa as a country with one huge group of people who all look alike. If you see and understand Africa as a continent instead of seeing black people as one group, you'd understand why it is not wise to throw all Africans under a single classification. 3. Race is oftentimes quite arbitrary, and there isn't any way to definitively categorize people according to it. Definitions of blackness are regional, and they're most typically used in the greater context of the transatlantic slave trade. So it may not even be an appropriate label to use on the Somali. That is because race is a social construct. During the transatlantic slave trade and the African scramble, Europeans used pseudoscience to divide the human race into distinct races, labeling some as inferior and others superior to justify their fellow man's subjugation. Most of the so-called black features that they used to categorize black individuals were based on West African people. When it came to race, the word black was used in a derogatory way. And I don't think it's a good idea to keep this identity that was created out of racism. Four, it's an inaccurate misnomer to call Africans black. I always ask myself, what does it mean to be black? Does it imply black skin? If anything, a majority of Africans, even sub-Saharan Africans, have a wide spectrum of skin complexions that range from almost pale to dark chocolate. The Kikuyu tribe of Kenya and even the Kamba are mostly chocolate complexioned. Why would you call these people black? The same can be argued for the Somali. Africa is simply too diverse to fall under one singular color. Africans are not black. It's because of racism that they are classified as such. You don't call Chinese, Japanese, or Korean people yellow people because it's a wildly offensive and racist term to use. Asians are classified by their heritage. That's how we should all be classified. It's actually degrading to continue using this label that Europeans put on us. We have tribes and culture. We are not a shade.
haddii faji la idhigiyo haddii dood la igu fura cidnaba lama ficiltameedantaydan fiirsadaa.
5. It makes them more vulnerable. Existing at the nexus of anti-blackness, xenophobia, and Islamophobia increases the visibility and vulnerability of the Somali. This has in part led to cases such as the tragic deaths of Shukri Abdi and more recently, Mohammed Hassan, a 24-year-old man from Cardiff who died shortly after coming into contact with the police. Their deaths serve as reminders that institutional racism and state violence are harsh realities that the Somali encounter due to their being collectively grouped with other black groups in the UK and the States. What's more, the more Somali youth identify with being black, the more they will be forced to conform to stereotypes of blackness. This has seen the rise of Somali gangs in Minnesota and London. As a result, they are easy prey for police brutality and institutional racism. In addition, it makes Somali lose touch with their culture, heritage, religion, and identity.
hadday fajacigu tihiyo hadday iga fiirsan tahay sidaan ahay lama fisho xogtaydan cidi fasirin sidaan ahay lama fisho xogtaydan cidi fasirin